All right, welcome back to our last lecture for this chapter. This is kind of a long one, but let's go ahead and talk about some different factors that go into our crime statistics and also what are some trends that we're looking at with that. So there are some factors that are going to fluctuate that help us with interpreting and predicting crime trends. So we're looking at imprisonment, youth populations, and the economy. When we're interpreting and predicting general crime trends, many experts tend to rely on these three things, the usual suspects. So imprisonment is based on the principle that an offender in prison or jail is unable to commit a crime on the street, and a potential offender on the street may be deterred from committing a crime by the fear of winding up in bars. I don't think our jail system is a deterrent, but that's a whole nother conversation we could have. Youth populations, because those under the age of 24 commit the majority of crimes, long and short of it. And then, of course, the economy was when we're talking about those lack of legitimate opportunities to earn income. And when that becomes scarce, some people turn to the illegitimate methods of crime. So let's look at crime in the 1990s and 2000s. So crime rates dropped between 1990 and 2000. And what happened and what we saw with that is that this right in the middle of the 90s, so in 1995, we started to note that the number of young males in the United States was getting ready to increase dramatically. So we predicted there would be 30,000 more young muggers, killers, thieves would be on the streets by 2000. And then so starting in 1994, the United States experienced this steep crime decline, and we've still been in that. But that's coming out of the 1980s, war on drugs, crack epidemic, mass incarceration. So we definitely saw that rise, but as we're talking about the 90s and the 2000s, that's where we started to see that dip in 1994. So economy was robust, incarceration was skyrocketing, but now we are happy to say that our crime levels are lower. We did see in 2015 quite a spike in murder rates, and that was attributed to gang violence. And then as the heroin epidemic started, so that's opioid crisis began, that's when we started to see a rise in some murder rates going up. So it's important to remember, you guys, that it's really a lot of this. So we may go up, 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 and we might have a big drop. There's a lot of this that's going on. We just have to kind of find those reasons and sources. And even though the years are different, you'd be shocked because, well, no, you probably wouldn't be shocked, but we see some of the same things happening. So keep that in mind when you're looking at different theories and trends in our society as a whole and how that's working. So, of course, there's a huge connection between crime rates and poverty. And we know that crime and victimization rates have decreased across racial lines over the past 20 years. That's a given. And these trends have been less positive for African Americans than for whites. So there is a strong correlation, remember, not causation, but correlation, putting some two ideas together and saying that they correlate together. So although our crime trends have been going down, if we're looking at it from a minority standpoint, it's actually gone up. So, for example, Blacks are considerably more likely to be both homicide victims and homicide offenders than whites are. And African Americans are particularly susceptible, to gun violence, firearm murder rates of 14.6 per 100,000 adults, compared with 1.9 for whites and 4.0 for Latinos. So there is definitely some differences when we're looking at violent offenders and how does race affect that. Of course, income levels, lack of education, that is my soapbox. The one thing that's going to change our crime rates is education, educating our youth, keeping them out of jail, keeping them out of those situations of strain that cause them to lead to other methods of gaining goods, gaining money, whatever the case might be. So when we talk about women in crime, we know that those numbers are going up. So we're starting to see an increase of women being involved in the justice system. Normally, crime is seen as an overwhelmingly male activity, but and we're looking at prison populations. Only 9% of the national prison and jail population are female. And in 2015, we had a statistic of 24% of all arrests involved women. So low numbers. But there has been some research that has shown some reasons why. There's been massive changes since the 1980s in the life circumstances and behaviors of women. We know that there are many more single parents, single mothers, and children being born out of wedlock where there's not a male figure in the home to support the child, both financially and emotionally. So a lot of scholars are convinced at this point that rising female criminality is a result of a justice system that's more willing now to incarcerate women. There for a long time, we didn't put women in jail like we do now. So that could play a role in why those numbers are up. So also we need to remember that women can be crime victims. And statistically, most women are going to be at greater risk for domestic violence, which domestic violence is an umbrella term that is really any variety of maltreatment. That can be physical, psychological, sexual, any sort of ill treatment against a woman when we're talking about women in crime. So another crime that appears to mainly involve female victims is stalking. So that's the course of conduct directed at a person that should cause the other person to have fear. So women can definitely be committing crimes, but they also definitely are going to be more likely to be crime victims. All right, guys, I know that this chapter was a lot of information with theories and trends, but just again, get into your textbook, do some reading, take some notes, and you guys will all be great. Have a good night.